warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, welcome to Morphology Talk, a talk show that discusses everything about morphology. Let's thank to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who always give us mercy and blessings. Then, salawat and salam always be delivered to our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I want to say thank you to our lecturer, Mr. Dedi, who has attended this talk show, and all of you guys, my beloved friends and the audiences. So, how are you guys today? I hope you're in a good condition, healthy, and happy. Before we start, let's meet our speaker, but let me introduce myself. My name is Sabrina Olivia Salsabila as your moderator today. So, we have two speakers today. First, we have Sofia Zahra Adni. Hello Sofia, how are you today?
Hi Sabrina, I'm feeling great, thank you.
Then we have Rahman Yusuf. Hello Rahman.
Hello guys.
Today we are going to discuss the word as a linguistic unit. Sofia Zahra Adni will explain the notion of word and the demarcation of words and phrases. Then Rahman Yusuf will explain phonological words and lexical integrity. And then don't forget to enjoy the performances from Group 13. So, let's get started! Sofia Zahra Adni, the time is yours.
Alright, thank you for the opportunity, Sabrina. Now, let me take you to the course. It has often been observed in the literature that the notion word is one of the most accessible linguistic notions for language users without linguistic training. This is particularly the case for speakers of a language with an orthographical system. The word, in its orthographic sense, in a language with an alphabetical script, defined as a sequence of letters not interrupted by space, is an accessible unit. Yet, even such a simple notion raises problems when we try to apply it. For instance, this definition would mean that the English compound syllable boundary spelled with internal spacing should not be considered as one word, but as a sequence of two words, which goes against the intuitions of speakers of English. A classical definition of the notion word can be found in Bloomfield's language that defines the word as a minimum free form. This means that a word can form, at least in principle, a linguistic utterance in isolation. For instance, when you ask, "What are we going to eat today?" the answer might be lasagna. This proves that lasagna is a free form. And since it cannot be decomposed into smaller meaningful units, it is a minimum free form, and hence a word. You will not find it difficult, however, to come up with cases where this simple criterion does not work. You cannot answer the question, "What is that?" with the word apple. Instead, for reasons of syntax, you have to say an apple. Although you will agree that apple is a word in English. What one also has to exclude is metalinguistic usage, because in that case, we can also use bound morphemes in isolation, such as in the question like which suffix appears in ability. The answer is et. An additional and often used criterion for woodhood, aimed at distinguishing words from phrases, is the criterion of cohesiveness or interruptibility. You cannot interrupt a word by putting other words in between its constituents. For example, since we can say, "John looked the information up," we should not consider "look up" as one word in the sentence. John looked up the information. Although semantically look up does form a unit. Such definitions and criteria are a good starting point, but not the end point of a scientific analysis of the linguistic unit of the word. I developed a more sophisticated notion word in such a way that it became a theoretical notion embedded in a general theory of language structure. This is a normal procedure in empirical sciences. One starts with some intuitive notion, and subsequently, by observing phenomena and developing theoretical analysis of these phenomena, a corresponding theoretical notion will be fleshed out. There is a distinction between lexeme and word form that comes from an intuitive notion. This is an essential distinction in using the notion word. For instance, when one wants to determine for whatever reason how many different words occur in a particular text, the answer will depend on whether you mean different lexemes or different word forms. The difference between these two notions of word presupposes the notion of inflection and the idea that word forms with different inflectional markings can be seen as manifestations of the same lexeme. A second important step in developing the theoretical notion word is the distinction between the notions word and lexical unit. It is well known that many language users tend to identify these two notions. In particular, the idea is that a linguistic unit that is given an entry in a dictionary is a word. We have seen, however, that this identification is wrong since it impedes a proper analysis of the way in which linguistic units are structured and behave as part of larger expressions. That is why the notion listeme is useful. Recall that a listeme is a linguistic unit that is listed in the lexicon. It is quite clear that language users are able to memorize chunks larger than words in their lexical memory, such as phrasal terms, red tape, yellow fever, etc. Idiomatic phrases, and even complete sentences such as proverbs. A linguistic unit is stored in lexical memory because it has unpredictable meaning properties or has a certain frequency of use or both does not tell us anything about its word status. This may be quite obvious, but the matter becomes theoretically interesting when we consider relatively small units, for instance, combinations of two words that could either be compounds, hence words, or phrases. This problem shows up quite frequently in the analysis of adjective plus noun sequences in Germanic languages, such as those mentioned before: red tape, yellow fever. Such sequences have the same function as undisputable words, that of classifying and referring terms. Why do we want to determine whether a combination of an adjective and a noun is a compound or a phrase? The answer is that assigning the proper structural interpretation to such word sequences is essential for predicting their behavior with respect to modules of the grammar, such as morphology. The relevance for morphology is obvious for languages with inflectional marking of adjectives, such as Dutch and German. The structural analysis determines whether the adjective bears an inflectional marking. For instance, the translation of the English adjective plus noun sequence hard disk is hard schief in Dutch, but faceplate in German. Both the Dutch and the German expression are adjective plus noun sequences. However, in Dutch, the adjective hard is inflected and ends with a, whereas in German, a language that also features adjectival inflection, the adjective fast or fix bears no inflectional marking. This observation leads to the conclusion that harder shift is a fresh, whereas fast Plaid is a complex word, namely an adjective-noun compound. This reasoning is based on the principle of lexical integrity, where it is said that the syntax neither manipulates nor has access to the internal form of words. The inflectional marking on the adjective in the Dutch example hardschief is a case of agreement, a rule that is syntactic in nature. Hence, the fact that the adjective has the form hard a, in combination with the principle of lexical integrity forces us to conclude that hardschief cannot be a word, since otherwise we would have a case here in which the syntactic rule of agreement manipulates the form of a word internal constituent. This illustrates that we have now achieved some further theoretical sophistication of the notion word by formulating the principle of lexical integrity. This principle is a theoretical interpretation of the defining property of the linguistic unit word that it cannot be interrupted. Hence, theoretical notions such as word are not isolated concepts that stand on their own, linked directly to empirical observations. Instead, their content is determined by their place in the network of terms and hypotheses that together form a scientific theory of a certain empirical domain. Therefore, we cannot determine purely intuitively, without further theoretical analysis, whether a particular sequence of words is a complex word itself. This requires further theoretical reasoning. Alright, I have explained about the notion word. Now, let me take you for a course of the demarcation of words and phrases. The issue whether a linguistic unit is a word or a phrase comes up regularly in relation to compounding. A word sequence might be either a compound or a phrase. Consider the following examples from French. Pomme de terre, that translated to apple of earth or potato. Voiture d'enfant, that translated to car of child or perambulator. Clair de lune, that translated to like of moon or moon-like. The English glosses for these French examples are all simplex or compound words. These French expressions are all established expressions for referring to specific entities. In other words, they are listeners of French. Hence, it is no wonder that people have sometimes called such expressions compounds. Yet, they clearly have the shape of a French phrase of the type noun, preposition, noun, and follow the synthetic rules of French that allow for noun phrases with a nominal head followed by a preposition complement. Therefore, the linguist Benveniste concluded that so-called nominal compounding in French is, in fact, a kind of what he calls microsyntax. What we observe here is that synthetic patterns that reflect the synthetic rules of a language function as templates for coining terms. Note that there are restrictions in this use of syntax for coining lexical units. The synthetic restriction in French is that, in contrast to normal syntax, the second noun in this type of lexical unit can normally not be preceded by an article or followed by an adjective that only modifies the second noun. An expression like voiture d'un enfant is certainly possible but blocks the specific interpretation perambulator. It has a different meaning, car of a child. Similarly, the expression une pomme de terre noire, that translated to an apple of earth black denotes a black potato, that is, it is not the noun terre that is modified, but the whole expression pomme de terre. In yellow fever, the adjective cannot be modified, such as very yellow fever, without the loss of the specific disease interpretation, although very yellow is a correct adjectival phrase of English. Here are some examples of such lexical multi-word expressions from Spanish and Greek. In Spanish, telón de acero, that means curtain of iron or iron curtain. Luna nueva, that means moon new or new moon. And in Greek, Sixros polemos, that means cold war. And mavrilista, that means blacklist. In many linguistic descriptions of such expressions, they are referred to as synthetic words, which means that they have the formal status of a synthetic unit, but are functionally similar to words in the strictly morphological sense. In traditional grammars of Spanish, such expressions are referred to as improper compounds, which also reflects the hybrid status of these linguistic units. This shows once more that the notion word in the formal linguistic sense has to be clearly distinguished from the notion term. A term is a linguistic expression used for the classification and denotation of entities. But terms are not necessarily words. The delimitation issue also crops up in the analysis of particle verbs in Germanic languages, such as German and Dutch. The particle verbs in these languages are similar to those of English. Let's see for some examples. Example A, dat Jan de informatie opzoek, which means that John the information uplook. And example B, Jan zocht de informatie op, which means John looked the information up. A difference with English is that the particles appear immediately before the verbs in embedded clause, as in example A, whereas they are standard in main clauses, as in example B, since finite verbs in main clauses appear in second position. As example A illustrates, the rules of Dutch orthography prescribe that particle and verb are written as one orthographic word, even though they do not form one word from the linguistic point of view, since verb and particle can be split, as in example B. Hence, the word in its orthographic sense is not necessarily a direct reflection of the word in its morphosynthetic sense. In conclusion, not everything that native languages users may call a word is a word from the linguistic point of view.
Mauridas and Christina are both 9. Every day, they go to primary school together from their rural village. After school, Mauridas plays with her brother and does her homework with her mother, who's a teacher. Christina looks after her 3 siblings and helps out in the fields. When they are 12, their lives go in radically different directions. Christina's mother dies, giving birth at home to her 5th child. Her father quickly remarries. Christina is forced to marry a man 3 times her age, while Mauridas goes to secondary school. Christina gets pregnant at 13 and contracts HIV from her violent husband. She's ostracized by her community, but can't escape. When Morides gets her first boyfriend at 16, her mother takes her to the family planning clinic. Receives sex education. When she finishes school, she trained as a doctor. By this time, Christina already has 4 children. She struggles to feed them and doesn't have the money to send them to school. Morides is able to decide for herself. She has 3 children over the next 10 years and is able to go back to work. She's able to contribute to her own family and the wider community. Christina's life could have been like that too if she'd been able to decide for herself.
That was great performance from Group 13, and thank you for Sofia Zahra, and your explanation was very great. Now we will hear Rahman Yusuf will explain phonological words and lexical integrity. Rahman Yusuf, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you Sabrina. And now I will try to explain phonological words. Phonological word is a linguistic unit for the representation of the prosodic properties of word and phrases, such as stress pattern and syllabification, and is also a domain of application for phonological rules. The notion word is that we must distinguish between morphosynthetic word and phonological word. Furthermore, we should realize that these two types of units are not isomorphic. A Dutch compound, for instance, is one morphosynthetic word, but consists of the more than one phonological word. Each of these phonological words has a word stress of its own, with the first one being the most prominent one, and is a domain of syllabification, the division of words into syllables. Many English compounds are spelled with internal spaces, referred to as open spellings, hence as the at least two orthographic words. We have spelling triplets such as taxpayer, taxpayer, taxpayer. The hyphenated spelling as in taxpayer indicates both that the word consists of 2 units, phonological word, and that it forms one morphosynthetic word. Many English prefixes are also separated from the stem by a hyphen, unlike suffixes. Antisocial, copilot, postwar, preeminent. This reflects that English prefixes are phonological words of their own, unlike most suffixes. The difference between the morphological and the prosodic structure of a complex word is also reflected by different orthographic convention with respect to hyphenation when a word is distributed across 2 lines. For instance, in British English, the word structure is hyphenated as struck or reflecting the morphological makeup of this word. In American English, this word may be hyphenated as structure, which reflect the syllable division and hence the prosodic structure of this word. The phonetic form of the word sequence is finer, with a syllable boundary between N and T. The last consonant of the verb that is realized as a T forms one syllable with the segment that form the pronoun R. That is verbal form, and the following weak pronoun appear to form one phonological word, because the domain of syllabification is the phonological word. Next one is lexical integrity. The principle of lexical integrity given above forbid synthetic rules to either manipulate or have access to the word's internal morphological structure. The first of this prohibition, no manipulation, serves to flesh out the idea that words have internal cohesion and cannot be interrupted. The principle of lexical integrity, as formulated in 1, excludes two kinds of syntax morphology interaction. 1. Manipulation of part of word internal structure, and 2. Access to word internal structure. Under manipulation, there subsume the synthetic movement of a word constituent and the splitting up of words by intermediate constituent. One of these phenomena is what we might call context-dependent morphology. The situation in which a particular synthetic construction goes hand in hand with a particular morphological form of words is that construction. Thus, this part of the lexical integrity principle may serve as a basic test to find out if a sequence of morphemes is a word or a phrasal lexical unit. The complex predicates can be interpreted as forming lexical units that consist of two grammatical words, and hence they can be split without violating lexical integrity. Remark that such combination of a root and suffixes must sometimes be assumed to form one grammatical word because the root and the suffix part are codependent. The reason for this is that is indeed the specific plural suffix "n" that is required by this construction. For example, we will come tomorrow with 20 persons. Note the incongruence between the person and number of the subjects and that of the possessive pronoun, so there are two different collective constructions that are identical except that the possessive pronoun can either be a variable and thus subject to the normal agreement constraint for possessive pronouns, or a fixed possessive pronoun. Thus the complex predicates can be interpreted as forming lexical units that consist of two grammatical words, and hence they can be split without violating lexical integrity.
That was amazing explanation. Thank you guys, Sofia Zahrani and Rahman Yusuf. For you guys who have question or any comments, feel free to drop it in comment section below and we will answer it as soon as possible. Thank you for watching this video. I want to sorry to every mistake I did, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
This is a true story. There was a young boy, Monty, son of a small-time horse trainer. Once, he was asked to write a paper about what he wanted to be and do when he grew up. That night, he wrote a 7-page paper describing his goal of someday owning a horse ranch. He wrote about his dream in great detail, and he even drew a diagram of 200-acre ranch showing the location of all the buildings, the stables, and the track. He put a great deal of his heart into the project, and the next day he handed it in to his teacher. 2 days later, he received his paperback. On the front page was a larger red F with a note that read, "See me after class." The boy went to see the teacher after class and asked, "Why did I receive an F?" The teacher said, "This is an unrealistic dream for a young boy like you. Owning a horse ranch requires a lot of money and resources. There is no way you could ever do it. Rewrite this paper with a more realistic goal. I will reconsider your grade." Boy went home and asked his father what he should do. His father said, "Look, son, you have to make up your own mind on this. However, I think it is very important discussion for you." Finally, after sitting with it for a week, the boy turned in the same paper, making no change at all. "You can keep the F, and I'll keep my dream," the boy told the teacher. Years later, the school teacher met Monty in a horse ranch where he took a bunch of kids to camp out. Monty told him that the property of 200-acre horse ranch where they are standing is owned by him. The teacher was shocked. The teacher said, "Look, Monty, I can tell you this now. When I was your teacher, I was something of a dream stealer. During those years, I stole a lot of kids' dreams. Fortunately, you had enough gumption not to give up on yours." As George Bernard Shaw said, "Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire. You will what you imagine. And at last, you create what you will."